Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Sportlight podcast. This week, we're going to talk to All-American volleyball player McKenna Miller from BYU. She talks about how legendary mental strength coach at BYU, Coach Manning, helped her through a really difficult injury. She's going to talk about what her teammates meant to her and how they were elite teammates. And she's going to talk about how athletes can use their Sportlight to help those around them. We hope you enjoy it. Take a listen.
Welcome to the Sportlight podcast for parents, coaches, and athletes. The Sportlight refers to the time in an athlete's life when they have increased ability to affect the culture around them and the increased opportunity to learn life's lessons through sports. This podcast aims to help parents and coaches capitalize on their athletes' precious time in the Sportlight. The Sportlight podcast is brought to you by Especially for Athletes program.
Well, I'm here with McKenna Miller, but now it's Asu, right? That got married after your senior year of volleyball. So most people would know you as McKenna Miller from BYU. And McKenna, you had a great career there at BYU. I know you're shy to talk about it, but you were an All-American all 4 years at BYU, Conference Player of the Year, your senior year in volleyball there. Your teams won 3 conference championships. You probably remember the one you didn't, that probably hurts the worst. Went to the Final Four in the NCAA volleyball tournament. So you just had an awesome career. So first of all, congratulations on that. That must have been really, really fun. So,
I was really blessed. It was a good experience.
Well, McKenna, we've talked a little bit about the mission of Especially for Athletes and trying to help our athletes to realize a couple of things, but I want to start with a few questions. Whenever we have an elite college athlete here, I would love you just to speak to a little bit what you've learned by playing for such an elite program at BYU, one of the best women volleyball programs in the country. And I'm sure you have incredible coaches there. And sometimes someone who's been to that elite level will learn some things that maybe you wish you would have known in high school. Even that if you could pass on to McKenna Miller in Marietta, California, in high school, what are some of those things you've learned about the price that it really takes to be elite that you would want to tell yourself when you were in high school?
So many things. I feel like that's kind of the cool thing as you get older and just as you play sports more, you learn things you don't even realize that you're learning until you look back and you're like, oh, wow, I didn't know I wasn't doing that or whatever. But I think one of the biggest lessons that I learned that I wish I would have known in high school is just the importance of humility, and not in the sense that probably everyone thinks, but I think just being able to be honest with yourself and admit that you can work on things and you can be better at things, because no one, and I feel like athletes especially, no one wants to admit that they maybe could have gone harder on a rep, or maybe like you always want to think like you're doing the best you can and all this stuff. And I feel like the longer you play a sport, the easier it is to get like good enough and be comfortable being good enough and not thinking that you need to try much harder because what you're doing is already good. And I could definitely see that happened to me. I feel like for one of my years, I had a great freshman year and I came back and kind of just thought, well, this is what's been working for me. And then my sophomore year was a little bit harder because teams knew who I was, and it was just something that kind of hit me really hard. So I think something that's just really important, and it is really hard to learn because no one wants to admit that they're not perfect and that they could do better, but only you know how hard you've worked or how much you've given. Like it was really easy sometimes to like go to college weights and kind of just go through the motions of what you're told to do versus I'm going to really push myself and this is why I'm doing it, and realizing that it's there to make you better. And so I think just having the humility to be like, I can always get better. And that's kind of just with life. You can always get better at something. And it's really easy to just coast once you're good enough, and just learning to admit that there's always something you can do better.
I bet that in high school too, so those who go on and play at elite levels like you, high school is obviously easier than playing on one of the best teams in the country.
Yeah.
And so sometimes that could give someone kind of a comfort level where they think they're awesome at everything. And then you arrive at college because it came so easy for you in high school.
Yeah.
And that could make it so you don't work as hard as you need to in high school. Then you arrive at college, you're like, oh, this is a different level. And now I understand what hard work is.
Definitely. And there's even, we have, I'll state this till I die, like the best coaches in the country at BYU. And there was times even like I thought I'd had a really good game and I'd go back and watch film, and our coaches were so diligent about going through every play, and they would tag you and say, hey, you can fix this, or this can be better. And sometimes it would be really easy to be like, what are they talking about? Like, I got the point, or I had a good game. What else do they want? But being able to just swallow that pride and be like, no, you're right. I could have done this better. Like, you're there, you have a coach because you want to be coached. And so I think just learning to always be looking for what you can improve and being able to take that feedback without getting offended, I think is something I wish I would have learned before I came to BYU. Because once you get, like, again, high school coaches, it's kind of just almost whoever's available can coach sometimes. And then you get to college and it's their job to win games. And if they have to be brutally honest to make you better, sometimes it's like this huge slap in the face that you're like, oh, I've never had a coach like get on me this bad, but it really was all for my benefit. And I'm able to look back and be like, wow, I'm really grateful I had coaches that pushed me so hard and were never satisfied. Even if I had a great game, there's always something I could have done better.
That humility that's awesome. I had an experience one time as a college baseball player. You probably did this too, but you would go off and you would do these little clinics for like kids and stuff. And I remember being with a kid and I was trying to help him learn something about baseball. And I remember what it was. It was, to hit the ball with your hips, not your arms, your core is where power comes from. And I was trying to get him to do that. And every time I give him this little tip, he was like, yeah, but, and it was just this little kid. So I didn't say anything or do anything. I just kind of laughed at it. But it had this phrase in my mind that sometimes we get yabbititis, where someone gives us this feedback, or a correction. You have a coach that gives you a correction and you just you don't grow because you get defensive and you're not humble. And so that's really cool you bring that up, because imagine if you could develop that and not only like be okay with it, but seek it out.
Yeah.
Even in high school.
It's like, it's human nature to get defensive. No one likes to be called out for doing something wrong. Like, that's everyone to this day, even me still after college. But I think just the sooner you're able to become more okay with it, and yeah, like you said, seek it out. That's like the players that coaches want, because they're the ones that they can tell really are coachable and really bought into what they want for their program. And I think a lot of the time, sometimes people have a hard time transitioning from high school to college because they've been taught by their high school or their club coaches or whatever. And then they get to their college coach who wants it done this way. And it's like, well, I was doing this and it was fine. And then once you get to that higher level of volleyball or whatever sport, it's not always going to be fine. I think just having that open mind and humility. Obviously, sometimes I've had, like, at those clinics, little campers ask for feedback after every little ball. And I think there is a little bit of too much of, but just showing that you are willing to take their feedback and apply it. And like, when coaches tell you something, make the effort to show that you're working on it instead of just being like, whatever, I know what I'm doing, or this is working.
And something you said earlier, you talked about doing reps, like when you're in the weight room and things like that. And you're the only one who knows if you're giving full effort. And that's something that we like to talk a lot about, because we have a phrase, one of the core principles of Especially for Athletes, we call it win the hour. And what win the hour means to us, you've probably heard the phrase win the day or, things like that. But to us, win the hour is we have different priorities throughout each hour of each day. And to concentrate, you're up for 16 hours a day. You should be getting that much sleep at least, and so take each hour of each day and really try to win that hour by giving your attention to the thing that matters most during that hour. So, when you're in math class, the way you win the hour is by giving your attention, not to your phone, not to the person next to you, but to the teacher, to mastering math. But the great thing about the win the hour concept and what you were saying, it's the same thing, is no one can look at you. No one could be the judge of whether you won an hour or not, except for you. You don't know. And I think that sometimes athletes fall in danger of just trying to look like they're working hard versus really working hard. And I would love just to hear a little bit more about that, just what you've learned about the price of coasting versus taking every opportunity to get great, and just that difference.
Also at BYU, we were super lucky because we had so many resources to help with everything. So part of being a student athlete is the school part, and that can be really hard when you're in a physical activity for 5 or 6 hours a day and you're exhausted. But and that was a hard lesson for me to learn. It took me a little bit to commit more to my school, and I was not a straight A student, not going to pretend I was, but I had to learn in school, especially because that's super individualized, like test scores and stuff. You're the only one that can really affect that. Games and whatever, especially volleyball, you have a team. Mm-hmm. So you can kind of have different outlets, but like school, it's just you. And so that was kind of a thing where I realized like, there's literally no excuse for me to put this on except for myself. And that was kind of one thing that I started. And so we had access to tutors, and BYU staff was great with working with us, which I'm really grateful for. And I think as much as sometimes I was so tired and I was like, I really just want to go home, but I had a meeting with the tutor and I was like, no, I should go do this because I know it's when I come to take that test, like it's going to help me. And I think just, in all things, sometimes weights, I was exhausted. You come from a 3-hour practice, conditioning, whatever, or you go to weights at 6 o'clock in the morning when it's dark and snowy, and that's about the last place you want to be. Just taking that time. I love, like you said, the win the hour, because while like weights may seem hard, I feel like if you break it up into hour chunks, it makes it seem less daunting of a task. And if you're like, if I can just give everything I have to this rep, this lap, whatever you're doing, it really will pay off. And I think that's something I appreciated, especially once I tore my ACL and I literally went from having 19 years of muscle in my leg to my leg was skinnier than my arm. I really had to work to get muscle back, to be back for my senior year. And it was miserable. Like there's no sugarcoating it. It was awful. But that's when I really had to like look to myself and be like, I want to be back by my senior year, and this is what I'm going to have to do. And it's going to suck. Like I know it, but I have to do it, and I'm going to work hard. And I could have easily been in rehab and being like, this hurts, I'm tired, I don't want to do this. But I think when you have a goal too, just an end vision of what you want is huge, because you know what you're working towards. And so it makes it a little bit easier to be like, I'm going to sacrifice for this. If you just blindly go through the motions of, I'm just here to show up at practice, play volleyball, whatever, like there's no linear direction to where you want to get. So why would you have the motivation to work hard if you don't know where you want to go? And so I think it's awesome to develop any type of goals that you can, because then it gives you a direction and can give you that kind of self-motivation, which sometimes is hard to find, especially when you're tired or cold or sore, whatever it is. Having those goals is huge because you're able to hold yourself accountable more. And then once you get those goals, it just feels so much better because you know how much work and stuff it put in.
Yeah, I love that. I love the concept of, winning the hour becomes easier if each of those hours are aimed toward things that are really important to you, Yeah. And sometimes if it's just like not connected to an overall goal that is really important to you, then it's hard to find that motivation to do things. So that's really awesome. You mentioned the torn ACL, and that was sad for everybody to see that right when your team was just like number one in the nation that year for a lot, just doing great things, and then to have just such a critical player go down. But when working back, one of the principles that we talk a lot about with youth, because a lot of them are facing some really tough challenges. I mean, there is anxiety and depression, and there's loneliness, there's suicide out there, there's just tough things at home, and life throws a lot at you. And one of the great things that sports does for people is it helps them to develop resiliency. And I'm just curious, what have you learned as you came back from your ACL injury and had to work through that, to have your leg as big as your arm and get back to where you had a great senior season? And what are some of the life lessons you learned from bouncing back from that?
So many. I think one of the biggest things is I had to learn to figure out who like McKenna, the person, was versus McKenna, the volleyball player, because my sport had been associated with who I was for a long time. And that was taken away super quick. And so it was kind of like this identity crisis. Like, well, what do I do? Like, my team's all practicing and I can't be at practice. Like, my team's conditioning and I can't go run. I can't even walk right now. And so it was this kind of tricky spot, but I'm really grateful because it gave me a lot of opportunity to just kind of reflect on who I was and what was important to me, and to work on like mental skills, which is huge. Kind of like how you were talking about with anxiety and depression and all that. That was a really good time. It was a trial and I had to learn to work through that. And I don't know if I ever got to that point, but I know how easy it is to get to that point. But it was a great opportunity for me to learn how to handle, because those were like the hardest days of my whole life. And that sounds like exaggerating, but it was rough. I'd have to go to 6:30 weights for like an hour and a half, go to my classes, go to rehab for 2 hours, go to practice to 2 hours, and stand there and shag balls while my teammates got to practice. And I was just sitting there, and then go to class again and do that almost every single day. And so they were really hard days, but I learned a lot just in terms of having to deal with challenges. And with that, I'll kind of like lead in. We have a mental strength coach at BYU who's awesome. Like, when I first heard a mental strength coach, I was like, what the heck is that? But he's awesome. His name's Craig Manning, and he's a rock star. And he helped me get through that a lot, just giving me kind of tips and stuff. And one of the biggest things he talks about is controlling what you can control. And I feel like that helps a ton with anxiety and stress, because we would talk about that with him, that anxiety isn't necessarily a bad thing because it means you care. If you're nervous about a game or a test or whatever, it's good because it means you care and you want to do well on it, instead of being apathetic and like whatever. But just learning how to manage that anxiety and not let it control your life. And so when we just focus on controlling what you can control, sometimes I'd go talk to him like, I just feel overwhelmed. Like, my day is booked to the hour. I have no time to just relax. And like, emotionally, it was so hard to just sit out and watch. Physically, it was so hard because I was in hours upon hours of weights or rehab or whatever. And we talked just about controlling what I can control. And it kind of ties into your winning the hour, just like, this is what my day is like. How can I make this the best, like get the most out of my 2 hours of rehab? And then just break it into chunks, instead of just looking at this overwhelming day of, oh my gosh, I'm leaving at 6 o'clock in the morning and I'm not going to get home until 8, and just breaking it down and being like, okay, in practice, maybe I'm not going to be able to play and that's going to suck, but I can be a really supportive teammate and form relationships with my teammates that I wouldn't necessarily have just playing. And I can form relationship with my coaches that I wouldn't have had if I was just playing, because I had to find other ways to connect now that I wasn't on the court. And I think when you just kind of break it down and looking, sometimes like you're going to lose games and that's life. You can't ever win every single game you play, but just controlling what you can in a game. And if you make a mistake, just working on the next ball and being, okay, I can do this on the next one. And I think that helped a ton with everything going on.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is awesome, because that control what you can control. In fact, anxiety, I think, comes a lot when we start worrying about those things that we have no control over. You know, when you're worried about something that you have control over, a grade or a test, or then there's something you can do. But when you're just worried about things beyond your control, a torn ACL, at that point, it's just all the things that could have been or whatever.
And it's so easy to spiral with that. And I think that's where a lot of stress comes from, is because we're worrying about things that might not even happen, you know? And that's human. Everyone does that, where they just think of, well, if this happens and I do this and this and this, and they just think life could be over from this one whatever. And that just, as anyone, it would just cause anxiety and stress. And that happens still to everyone. No one's going to be perfect. But I think when I was able to simplify it and just look at what I can control, when I was going through those hard days and it was like everything literally just seemed so like depressing, Craig had me do a journal of things I was grateful for. And so every day I'd have to do like 3 things that I was grateful for, 1 thing I loved about myself, and 1 thing I love about like another person or something. And that was just awesome, because at a time where I felt like everything had been kind of taken away from me, I was able to reflect and look at how many good things I really do have in my life. And when I was no longer McKenna the volleyball player for a little bit, I had to find other things. And it was a little uncomfy writing things that I loved about myself. Like, it's weird, but it really forced me to look at myself and be like, I like that I'm a good friend, or I like that. And so I think just having that when life gets really sucky, and it happens, like last year was rough probably for everyone, but just taking 5 minutes out of your day to think of, 3 to 5 things you're grateful for, something you like about yourself, just what reinforces that sports aren't everything. And one day you're going to have life without sports, and to really look at how good of a life it could be, no matter how bad it seems. Because in those days I was like, this sucks. Like, there's nothing fun. Like, it's just this miserable long day and I am in pain and emotionally I'm just drained. And then taking that time to be like, but you know what? Like, I had a really yummy dinner tonight, and I got to see my friend today. And just things like that just really make you appreciate and put into perspective how small sports really are. Even though they do take up a lot of your life, in the big picture, there's so much more important things going on. And that was something huge. And I've not been great at it, but I've tried to still kind of keep just a little gratitude log in my journal, where I'll just go and be like, I'm grateful for this person today, and I'm grateful for a breakfast burrito I had for lunch or something. Just like little things really makes you appreciate. And I feel like life is a lot happier, even when it sucks. When you're able to focus on the good, it just makes the day way better.
Well, thank you for that, because I think sometimes we tell youth, be more resilient, but it's like, be resilient. Like, if we can do that, it's like, be happy. It's like, oh, sorry, I forgot, but I love that tool, that your mental strength coach gave you to help when you're having tough times. And those tough times could come from an injury, or even being taken out of a lineup, or more serious things in life. And that's a wonderful, thank you for sharing that with people. I think that will really help some people. So I want to transition a little bit, McKenna, to one of the main purposes of Especially for Athletes. We believe that all the things we've been talking about, like working hard and being resilient and bouncing back from injuries and setbacks and losses, like all of that is really important, but it really leads to the main objective of Especially for Athletes. And that is, it makes what we call the Sportlight grow brighter, which is the opportunity that you have to influence and help other people because you are an athlete. And the brighter that Sportlight grows, then the greater power for good that a person could be. And we have a wristband that we wear. It says "Eyes Up, Do the Work" on it. And so for us, eyes up means keep your eye out, look for people who might need your help. And then do the work is when you see someone who might need your help, like actually do something. Don't just feel bad for them. Don't just, but do something. So eyes up, do the work is is a big part of kind of what we are, especially for athletes. And I wanted to kind of go in stages, almost like a circle getting wider and wider. But what we have noticed is sometimes some of those people who need your most help are on your own team. Like sometimes your team is going through tough things in their life, or some of these things we've talked about, depression, anxiety, and things like that. And I would just be curious, you've played on many teams and you've had some awesome teammates and I'm sure a variety of experiences, but what have you learned about being a great teammate and being there for your teammates from your experiences?
A lot. I've been blessed with some awesome teammates, but something that just particularly sticks out when you said that, I think there's a difference between being a great teammate and then being just a good teammate. And it was one of the hard lessons I kind of talked about that you learn and you don't love it at the time, but when you look back, it's a really good lesson. So I had one of my teammates, her name is Ronnie Jones-Perry. She's unbelievable. First team All-American, like broke so many records at BYU. Crazy work, like just ultimate workhorse. And I kind of talked about it, how like my sophomore year, I'd kind of just let off the gas a little bit. Thought I was good. And Ronnie talked to me, and over summer we would have meetings. This was after my sophomore year. We'd have meetings with our mental strength coach, but it was like over summer. So it was kind of optional. They couldn't make you come. And one of the days I was like, I'd rather go to this, so I'm not going to go to that meeting. And Ronnie, we were playing beach later that day, and Ronnie pulled me aside and she was like, hey, I know that you wanted to go do that other thing, but I really think you should have been at the meeting. And I think it's really important. And I was kind of like, what? Like, I've never had someone, my teammate, kind of call me out for something like that. But I was able to be like, no, like Ronnie is right. I probably should have gone to that meeting. And I think sometimes in this, we get caught up in wanting to be a good friend and wanting to be nice, and that we just kind of let things slide, when ultimately, like, if you want to be great in anything, we kind of talked about, you have to put in the work. And so I was so grateful because Ronnie was just always holding me accountable. And she's one of my best friends today, but it didn't mean she didn't call me out when I wasn't being smart. And so it is important to have like sympathy and empathy, and if your teammate's going through a hard time, and being there for them. But also I think leading by example and kind of showing them like, hey, this is what we do, instead of just being like, it's fine, whatever. And I'm super grateful that she pulled me aside that one day and talked, because it really had like a come to Jesus moment where I was like, oh, I probably could be doing more. And it's a hard conversation to have, especially if you're friends with your teammates. Like, that's why I appreciate it with Ronnie so much more, because if it's a coach or something, it's pretty easy. You're like, okay, yeah. But when it's one of your best friends coming to you and being like, hey, you shouldn't have done that, it was kind of like, whoa. As hard as that conversation can be. And then her doing that taught me to sometimes be with other people like, hey, we don't do that on this team. Like, because creating that team culture is so important. And I think that's why BYU is so good, is because their culture is unbelievable. But it takes people to defend the culture like that. And it might make you look uncool. It might make the person mad at you. But I just thought it was really impressive that she was like brave enough to kind of call me out on my crap and say, hey, you can be better than that. And I was like, you're right, I could. And she was an awesome leader and inspired literally everyone around her. And I think that was just a really cool, you kind of don't really think about it, but talking to your teammates, because as a team, especially, you want your team to succeed. And the team is only going to be as strong as the weakest link. So if you have someone that's not pulling their weight or not giving their all or whatever, being able to be bold and kind of be like, hey, I know you can be better than this. And not in a mean way, still deliver it nicely. But I think that was really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I see a connection between that and the first thing that you talked about, that humility. If you have a team full of people who are going to hold each other accountable and are going to expect excellence and effort, and at the same time be humble and accepting of correction, then you can have that culture that helped BYU be this national powerhouse in volleyball.
And everyone like should want, as an athlete, as a competitor, you want to be you want to win games. And I think a lot of the times people just think it's how you play and that's it. But especially at BYU, I learned how important having that team culture is, where everyone's giving their all, and you should want your teammates to give your all. I think sometimes it's kind of easy to have competition between team members because you want to play and beat them out or whatever. But like ultimately, especially in a team sport, you're trying to win as a team and you're going to lose as a team. So you should want everybody on your team giving their all. And sometimes that might mean having hard conversations saying like, hey, we need you. And I know whatever's going on, but I think the best competitors bring that out in other people. At least all of the best athletes and that I've seen in the pros or college expect that excellence from everyone around them. And not only do they expect it, they show it and they're that example. And it makes you want to be like that because you almost kind of feel guilty. Like, I was like, Ronnie's doing so much. Ronnie's going to weights twice a day. And like, it inspires you and it motivates you. And it's easier to not get mad when you see they're doing it themselves. If you're kind of hypocritical about it and they're like, you should have gone to this and then not showed up the next one. You're like, why would I listen to you? But yeah. I think setting that example of excellence is huge. You got to walk the walk or talk the talk and walk the walk.
Yeah. That's all. And that's not anywhere. That's why I love doing these interviews, McKenna, is like those of you athletes who have played on these like incredible teams and could give us insight into what makes that culture. Why can they replicate it year after year after year after year? Because you see that, and that holding your teammates accountable. Because my mind instantly went when I asked that question to the warm and fuzzy, like, hey, McKenna, are you doing okay? Are you having a bad day? Which, is really important, as you said, to reach out, but also to be great. And like in all aspects of life, because I had teammates every now and then that sometimes teammates don't make the best choices in their life, and you can see them heading for a very dangerous situation. And a great teammate would say, hey, you need to stop that. Like, you can't head that direction. That's not going to be good for you, even if it's a personal life thing, not a volleyball thing or whatever thing. And so that's part of being a great teammate. That's awesome. I would just be curious. So if you could go back to McKenna Miller in high school, and there's a reason why I ask that question that way all the time, because a lot of the people we speak to are high school athletes. I look back, I'll just speak for myself. I look back at my high school experience and I have some regrets because of my own insecurities and things like that. I'm not sure that I helped as many people as I could. I think I was in a position to help more people who may have been lonely or without friends or just struggling with life in general, or even making bad choices that could affect their future. I was in a position to help, and I wish I could go back and like take myself and just say, gosh, what about so-and-so, and rewind my life. But you've had these opportunities as your Sportlight has grown brighter and brighter to impact your community and those around you. And you've probably learned some lessons from that. And we're trying to help our high school athletes be courageous enough to approach people who might be having a hard time when they see it, to do the work and like go help somebody. Do you have any advice or thoughts on that for our high school athletes that you would give yourself if you could go back and do that over again?
I just think that whole message is awesome. And I might have touched on it, I think, but I think the best way to do that is just push yourself out of your comfort zone. Because again, in all things in life, if you want to get better, you're going to have to be uncomfortable. In sports, school, whatever, to push yourself to be better, it's going to be uncomfortable and you might not like it at first. And it's going to feel weird. No one likes to not be comfortable. But I think making that effort to talk to people can be scary. Like I said, if you talk to a stranger, you see someone struggling, you're like, they don't know who I am. And it's super easy to kind of negative self-talk and convince yourself reasons why not to do something. But I think especially with that message that you guys are sharing, and it's awesome. And I love that that's going around, but is that sometimes it's going to be uncomfortable. For good things are never easy. And I wish, kind of looking at my high school self, I kind of just stuck to my bubble of friends and because I was comfortable there. And I wish there was times when I would have made more of an effort just to befriend more people, not even say hi, but like sometimes I find something out about someone, like, that's so cool. How did I not know that they did this? And it was like, I should have put more time investing and making relationships and just pushing my comfort zone to open my friend bubble, basically. And there's so many cool people in a high school. It's just this kind of melting pot of all sorts of people. And so there's so much potential for friendships and relationships that you'll never know unless you push yourself out of your comfort zone for a little bit.
You know what? I love the things you're saying, because that's been my experience, right? Is I don't look back at myself and think I was a mean kid. I wasn't a bully.
Yeah.
But it's easy because of your own insecurities to just kind of, okay, I'll stick to what I know.
Yeah.
It's scary.
Yeah.
But I love what you say, because you'll learn there are friends out there that you could make that will have a big impact on your life, not just you on theirs, but it takes getting out of that comfortable friend bubble. And sometimes even as friends saying, let's invite more people into this group and being more inclusive.
Yeah.
And so.
And I think a lot of times no one's, at least from my experience, I feel like no one is particularly trying to be exclusive and say like the whole, you can't sit with us or whatever. Like that might happen. I've never seen that because most people are good-hearted and they don't intentionally mean to exclude others, but I can see it. And you can kind of tie it even to team sports, like forming that relationship with your teammates, and the better relationships you have. Like I even just went to dinner tonight with all our teammates from 2 years ago, and we talk every day. And it's because we were teammates, but it doesn't mean we necessarily knew each other before we all got there, but you put in the effort to get to know these people and invest in their lives. And they're my best friends now in the whole world. And I think there's just so many fascinating people that could impact you, like you said, if you're willing to put in the effort to like try to find and build these relationships with people.
Awesome. And that's a big part of winning the hour too. Like sometimes we feel like that social time just is a time just to chill and just relax. And it is, but one of the ways we could win those social hours is by breaking out of that comfort zone and reaching out. And the emphasis you're putting on those people end up blessing our lives. They end up enriching our lives. We end up learning from them. And one of the things that we often say as we go around and speak is, almost everything that's good in life, you said you have to get out of your comfort zone. It also takes risk, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you might walk up to someone and think, hey, I'm going to include them. I would love to get to know them. And you try and it like blows up in your face. And they're looking at you like, don't talk to me, but that's a risk. And almost everything that I have in my life right now, it took some level of risk of looking stupid,
Yeah.
And so those are great thoughts that will really help the youth who want to do this and are just trying to get up the courage to do that. So, well, McKenna, thank you so much for taking time with us tonight and the things you've shared. This has been a wonderful discussion. And to close, knowing what it, especially for athletes, is all about, and knowing that, a lot of youth around the state will hear this interview. I'm just wondering if you have anything you would like to say directly to them, even if it's redundant to some things. What's most important to you personally that you would want them to know?
I think just the biggest summary is effort. If I was just summarizing everything I just talked about, but putting in the extra effort with your sport, with school, with religion, with friends, and going out of your comfort zone. And we talked about it. Only you know the effort you put out. And you said it could blow up in your face, but I think part of being an athlete is you get knocked down, and you said being resilient and come back. And we could take that as an injury, or we could take that as being someone saying, don't talk to me. And you still allow yourself to talk to other people and invite. And I think athletes in high school have such a special platform because high school holds such a big memory in most people. They'll talk about, oh, when I was in high school, I did this and this. And that's such a big part of people's lives. And you want to be able to look back and be like, I made my high school a better place and I helped make people better. And that does just take effort. And you can say you did all these things, but I think just putting in that time and genuine like thought and emotion and care for people. Don't just ask someone to sit with you to check a box so you can say you did it. Like, put in that effort to get to know someone and reach out, because you could change their whole high school experience. And I feel like something that kind of like motivates me is cheesy, but the quote, like, leave people better than you found them. And what I want people to think of when they hear me is that I was a good friend and I was nice and I was kind. And you don't ever want someone to remember you as being rude or whatever. So just really putting in that effort to be a good person and reach out. And I think it's crazy the chain reaction that could have on people. And I think it's an awesome message and it's good. I love the Sportlight.
Awesome. Well, McKenna, thank you. And that's a great way to end. I mean, another way to say our whole message in one simple statement is put in the effort to leave people better than you found them. And that's a great way to live a life. So thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us. And
yeah, my pleasure. This is fun.
We look forward to maybe talking to you in the future and getting more insight from you.
Anytime. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, McKenna.
Thanks.
Have a great
night.
That
was fun. Letting me relive my glory days.
Thank you, everybody, for joining the Sportlight podcast. We encourage you to subscribe and to share it with your friends. We hope you enjoyed it today. Eyes up, do the work.
This has been the Sportlight podcast from Especially for Athletes, sponsored by Coca-Cola. You can learn more about Especially for Athletes by visiting the website at especiallyforathletes.org. You can also learn more about the book, The Sportlight, by Shad Martin and Dustin Smith at especiallyforathletes.org/book.